Calculators can be really helpful for doing big calculations, and in this part of the tutorial we want to look at how we can implement the logic of our calculator, because in the last tutorial we already implemented this whole design. So if you haven't watched it, then check this video also out. And in this tutorial we want to create this basic calculator where you can do some basic calculations. The first thing we like to do is to go to the pubspec YAML file and put here two plugins inside. So the first plugin is this math expressions, which you put under your dependencies inside. And with this package we can calculate all these mathematical expressions. And lastly we add also this package Riverpod, because we want to make all the calculations and so on with the state management of Riverpod. Make sure to restart your application afterwards. At the beginning we create a file called Riverpod, and here inside we basically create a state notifier provider, and inside of it we create this calculator notifier. This is the class which we want to create right now, and this class calculator notifier extends from the state notifier, and here inside you need to put then your model object inside. So first of all I create here this constructor. I also call this supper method, and here we create then our calculator model object. And also here at the top we also put the calculator inside. If you don't have any clue about how Riverpod works, then I totally recommend you to watch the video which I put you into the description of this video here. The next thing is that we want to create this calculator model. It consists then of all these values which we have here in our application. Therefore we create here a new file, calculator, and inside we create a model. And we put here the equation and the result as two parameters inside. So the equation is here every time displayed here at the top, and the result here at the bottom. Next to it we also need later another field which I want to include already, so I simply put it here inside and explain you later more about this field. After it we create our constructor and give everything some default value. So for this equation and the result we set here both times 0 as default, and should append we set to true. And lastly we also want to add here this copy constructor, and with this one you can basically later create a second instance of your calculator and modify some fields, because here we have everything final, so you cannot change this model object here. However, you can later then change it with this copy method and only put the things inside which you like to change. Back in this Riverpod file we only need to import this library again, and then we are done with it. In our main file we also need to add here this provider scope around our app. So simply create here this provider scope and also import here this Riverpod plugin. Now we have completed the setup for Riverpod, and we want to go over and actually create the functionality. So if you click on these different buttons, then it should be here appended to the top. In our Riverpod file we create a new method which is called append, and this will be executed every time if we click on one of these buttons. Here inside we put this button text inside, which will be for example the 7, this 8, or for example if we choose here an operator, then this operator will be here inside. And then what we want to do is to call the state, and the state is our model here, our calculator. And here we want to change the equation, so this is this field here at the top. And what we want to do with it, we want to override it with a new value. Basically what we are doing here is to copy the current calculator instance which has these default values, and then we want to put here only the equation to a different value, and that's what we are doing here. So we want to actually get the equation, so I create here a new callback, and here inside we want to actually append the current text which we have here with the new text. So for example if we click here on the 7, then it will be appended here to our calculator. And what we also want to do is to make sure that if we have here 0 in the beginning, then we don't want to append it, we want to replace it by the new text which we type here inside. And this is the whole functionality what we need for implementing here the buttons for now. Therefore let's go back to our main file, and here we go down to this build button row which we have created in the last tutorial. And here basically we have two properties. So if we click on this button, then we currently print it here to the console below, and we want to exchange it and put here our real functionality inside. Therefore we create here a new method on clicked button and put here the text of this button inside. And within this method, we want to get the instance of our provider. So we get here access to our provider by calling context.read, and then we put here the calculator provider inside. So this is this global instance of our state notifier provider. And with this one, we get actually access to this calculator notifier, which then has access to our calculator state. And back in our main file, we call then this calculator. And here we can then access the method which we have created before, this append method. And inside of it, we put the button text of this button inside. To make this here work, we also need to adopt here these two values. So we go here to the top to these values. And here what we want to do is to actually get access to our calculator model. And therefore we need to wrap this here inside of a consumer widget. And with this consumer widget, we can then consume our provider. So we can actually call here the watch method. And within this watch method, you put this calculator provider inside. So it's again this global instance of our state notifier provider. This time we also call here after our provider this state to get access to the state of our provider. So basically here in our Riverpod, we get then access to this calculator object. And now the last thing is to simply exchange here these values. So for this one, we want to actually put the equation inside. And for the second one, we want to put the result inside. And this should already work. So if I type here a number, then he will put all the numbers inside. And basically the consumer widget will care for it that every time if this provider state gets here updated, then this whole UI here below will also be updated, and therefore our equation and our result will be updated. Again, I want to show you what this line is doing. So in the beginning, our equation is 0. And if this is the case, then we simply replace it with the new number. So we will not append it. So simply the new number will be put here inside. And otherwise, if we have here now the second case, so we have already number inside, then it is not fulfilling this case here. And then we are going here inside where we take the current equation and put here our button text after it inside. So I put here, for example, the 9 inside, and then the 9 will be also printed here inside. And also if I put here these other operators inside, they will be also included here. The next thing what we can do is to improve here this append method, because it is not really cool if you can put here all these operators inside, because this doesn't make sense, and that's what we want to change. To ensure that we always can only put one operator inside, we add here another case, and here we want to check if we have already an operator at the end. And therefore we simply take the state equation, which is this field here, and if already an operator is at the end of this equation, then we don't want to add another operator. And we also want to make sure that this operator which comes after it is also an operator. Therefore we simply have here another method is operator, and we put here our button text inside to check if the new thing what we type here is also an operator. And if you wonder what these methods are doing, I don't want to go into detail about them because they are pretty basic. However, if you want to get here this whole source code, you can get it with the first link in the description, and with the second link you can get my Flutter course where I teach you how you can become a more advanced Flutter developer. Let's go back to our append method, and here what we want to do is to actually get the new equation. So what we want to do is we want to get the current one, and then we want to get everything except the last symbol which we have typed. So we get in this case 555. And now if we click here on this new operator, then we want to simply exchange this new operator and put it here instead of this plus. So we simply take this 555 and then we put here our new button text inside. Let's try it out. So I simply take here now another operator, and you see he will simply replace the operator with the new operator. If you notice, every time if we now change here these operators, the text will jump a bit, and this is not really cool, and I will show you how you can quickly change it. So we go simply to this text in our main file, to this equation text, which is exactly this text here. And inside of our text style, we simply need to add one field. So we set here the height and we set it to 1. And if we do this, then we make sure that every time the text will have here the same size, no matter which character is here going inside. And now if I click here, you should see that it always stays at the same position and it will not jump. Now the next important thing is to do some calculation. So basically we want to make sure that this is calculated, and therefore we want to implement right now this equals case. Within our Riverpod file we create a new method, and this is called equals, and within it we create another method which is called calculate, and here we want to do the calculation. So if we click on this one, that the calculation will be processed. For this calculation we want to make use of this plugin mass expression, and this one will then do the calculation for us. Therefore we need to first of all get the expression, and here we simply take our field, which is this field here, and then we want to replace these illegal characters because this is not a real multiplier character, and we also want to exchange here this other character which is not correct, so we change it to the normal mathematical character. After it we have here our real expression with which we can do our calculation. After it we simply create a new parser, and within our parser we can then pass our expression. After that we create also here this context model, and everything of it comes from this plugin which we have integrated before. After it we want to evaluate our result, so we simply put the result of our parser here inside and call evaluate, and then we also need to set here this type of our evaluation and also our model inside, and this will then get us the result of this calculation. The last step what we need to do is to put this result inside of our field. So here we have our calculator, and then we need to replace this field which we have here inside. Therefore we simply call here state, and we override it with a copy of our current state, and then we put here the new result inside. And this will then simply make sure that the instance is copied with all the fields which we had before, and we only change this result field of our new copy. And to make here this equals work, we also need to call this method within our UI. Therefore we go here to this onClicked button method, which is if we every time click on one of these buttons, then this is executed. And last time we appended here some things. However, now we also want to make here another calculation if we click on this equals sign. Therefore, instead of using this method, we want to create a switch, and here inside we create the case that we click on this button. Then we want to call our calculator equals method, and this is exactly this method which we have created right now, which will then do the calculation. And otherwise, if we click on all the other buttons here inside, then we want to actually append this to our current text. And because we call this line here at the end, we don't need to call it here at the beginning anymore. Alright, let's try our example right now out. So I simply take here some numbers which I can calculate. I click here plus and +5, and then we click here on equals, and you should see that the result is displayed here at the bottom. And this is because we put here this inside of our result field, and this result field is later then displayed here in our main file, like you can remember within our build result method. And here we basically have the two text widgets. The first one displays here the equation, and the second one will then display the result. And like you can see, our calculator works already pretty good, so I can simply calculate here some basic things. However, there are a lot of errors which we want to fix right now, because not everything is working fine. And also if we want to delete here something, then this is also not working. The next thing we want to implement is this delete case. So if we click on this character, then we want to delete one single character. And therefore I simply go here again to our onClicked button method, and here inside, if we then click on this button here, then we want to call in our calculator the delete method which we want to create right now. So let's go again to our Riverpod file, and here I create this new method delete, and then we get the equation. So this is this line here, and from this line we want to make sure that this is not empty, because otherwise then we don't need to delete anything. And here we get the new equation by simply calling substring, and then we want to make a substring of all this text besides the last character. And like before, we also want to update our current equation, so we call state copy and put here our new equation inside. Alright, let's try it now out. So we have, for example, this calculation, and I click here on this back button and you see that he simply deletes everything. However, he is not updating our result, and that's also what we want to change. Therefore, after every delete, we also want to call this calculate method, which will then calculate again the new value out of our expression here at the top and will then create a new result. Inside of our calculate method, I want to put the calculation inside of a try catch, because sometimes if we then click on delete, then maybe it looks, for example, like this. We click here on delete and this is not what he can calculate. However, if we put here this try catch around, then we simply ignore this case that he cannot calculate this. And now let's try it out. So we have called here every time calculate after our delete, and if I delete here something, then you see that he simply do the calculation for this expression also, and if I go also back, he will simply put here the 2.0 inside. In case we have here our last character and we click again on the back button, then you see that this is not working here fine, and therefore we want to put here a 0 inside and also here below a 0 inside to reset everything. And to add the special case that we have no characters here inside, we simply make sure that our new equation is empty, and if that's the case, then we want to reset here our view, so we put it again to 0 and 0. Otherwise, if our new equation is not empty, then we simply put here the new equation inside and also do the calculation again. Let's now create this reset method, and here inside we basically want to set the equation, which is this text here at the top, again to 0, and also the result we set to 0, and then we simply create here our new state object, and here we put then the new equation and the new result inside. So let's try this special case out. So if I click here on delete, and then you see that we have here the 2 inside, and if I click again on delete, then he will simply reset it and put it again to 0. Now we go again to our main file, and every time if we click on this button, then we also want to implement here a special case for this button, because right now here it will simply put this here inside. However, what we want to do is to simply call the reset method, which we have created before, and then he want to reset our equation and also the result again to 0. Let's also try this case out. So I put here some numbers inside, and then I click here on this one, and then he will reset again everything to the normal state. For our buttons, we also want to implement the long press. So if we click on this one short, then it should delete one character. However, if we click on this one for a longer time, then we want to implement this case here. So we call a new method on long clicked button and put here our text of this button inside. And what we do then here is to basically get this reference to our calculator provider. So we get here access to the state notifier provider. And then we want to see if our text, which we have clicked on, is this case here, so that we have tapped on this here for a long time. And if that's the case, then we want to do the reset. So we simply want to also put it again to 0 and 0. Alright, let's also try this case out. So we have here something inside, and I click on delete, and he will simply delete one character at a time. However, if I click here long time on it, then he will do this reset, and then he put here again 0 and 0 inside. Furthermore, we want to actually fix some bugs of this application. So for example, we have this case that we have here some calculation, and then we press on equals, and after it we click again here on these numbers, then he will simply append this number. However, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do after the calculation is to actually put here then the new calculation inside if we type here something. So you should simply put here 65 and everything else is deleted. To do this, we go to our equals method, which is here every time if we click on this button, executed. And what we want to do here is to call another method, which is called reset result. And we want to implement this method right now. Within this method reset result, we want to get the current result and put it here inside of this equation field. So we basically get here our result, which is this text, and put it here inside of this field. After it, we want to update our state, so we call here state copy, and here inside we put the new equation inside. So basically we put the result text, which is this text, and put it here to the top inside. And we also put here this should append to false, which means after we clicked on this equal sign that he should not append any further characters. Now we need to care that this case is also implemented within our append method. Therefore I will comment this else case right now out, and we want to implement another case. So we create first of all this should append case. So we simply want to append every time a new number to this line here. And what we do therefore is to simply put this thing here inside, which we have created before, because this simply appends here every time the text which we get from this button and put it here to the end of our equation. However, we also want to implement the other case in the case that we don't want to append our result, and therefore I go here into the else case, and then we look here if our button text which we put here inside is an operator, and if it is an operator, then we want to take our current equation and append it with the new text. So we always want to put this operator at the end. However, if it is not an operator, then we simply want to put the new button text as our whole equation. So this means that we simply replace the whole equation with the new number, for example 5, which we have typed. And that's all what we need here for this case. And the last thing we also want to implement is that we set again the should append to true. And right now we set here every time the should append to false. However, if we append here something successfully, then we also want to set again this should append to true. Now let's try it out. So we have here some calculation and I click on equals. Then we have here our new calculation. And now if we click here on anything, then it should simply put here the new number inside instead. And for the second case that we put here after this equals an operator inside, then he should append it. Let's also look at this case. So I click here on equals, and this time I don't click here on a number, I click on a plus, and then he should simply append it here. Another problem we have is that if we type here something, then the result is never updated. However, we want to update it every time if we type here something, and therefore we go to the append method, and every time if we append here a new number, then after we have put here the new equation inside, then we want to actually do the calculation again and want to calculate our result here at the bottom. Alright, let's try it out. So right now, every time if we tap here on one of these numbers, then he should automatically implement here the calculation and update it. And we don't need to type here every time on this equals button. This is everything about this basic calculator. I think there are some special cases which we haven't implemented, so if you find anything, then make sure that you also implement the special cases which we haven't put here inside, because I think we have here some mistakes. However, now you know how the basic operations work with the calculator and how to implement this calculator properly. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel here to get the latest news about Flutter, and see you soon. Bye!